Actually, it's 3:00. 3:00. There it is. We're rocking and rolling. Let's do it. I don't see it. Why don't we start with meeting called to order? Okay, there we go. Roll call, please.
Chair Wasserman,
Here.
members Tucker,
Here.
Siebert,
Here.
Crabtree,
Here.
Herrera, Rogers,
Here.
Courtney,
Here.
Wasserman,
Here.
Schmidt,
Here.
Lazat,
Here.
Fitzwater.
Here. Well, at least I'm here twice. All right. All right. That's and the recording, the audio, the video, everything started when we started, and nothing before that is appropriate or a public record. I want to start with item number 1, which is to approve the minutes of our previous meeting, April 30th, Special Implementation Board.
I have to excuse myself because I wasn't here for
Okay, and you don't even have to if you wish. You can still vote. If you've looked at them and you think they're reasonable, just so you know,
Okay.
as far as the law, that's fine. You want to recuse, which is fine. You know what? Why don't we start, if you don't mind, my vice chair? Why don't we start? Vera, we'll start with you and just go around the table, do introductions. I think, please.
Sure. Vera Todorov, Agency Counsel.
Ken Schreiber, Interim Executive Officer.
Linda Lazat, Santa Clara Valley Water District.
Rob Courtney, Santa Clara County Parks.
Courtney Siebert, Morgan Hill.
Brian Schmidt, Santa Clara Valley Water District.
Mike Wasserman with the Board of Supervisors.
Kat Tucker, Gilroy City Council.
Jason Rogers with the City of San Jose.
Tom Fitzwater, Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority.
Andrew Crabtree with the City of Morgan Hill.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Also, anyone from the public wishing to speak about anything not on the agenda, let me know that.
Do you want me to do that right now?
What?
I have one item that I wanted to speak about.
Yes, we'll do that in just a second.
Okay.
Anybody else in the public wishing to speak about anything not on the agenda? Okay, and if you do, what do we have here? Cards? Any item on the agenda? What do we use here? Just raise your hand, okay? And let me know if you wish to speak about any item not on the agenda. Vera, please go ahead.
I realized that this would be my last meeting with the Implementation Board before I end my services with the agency. And I wanted to tell you what a pleasure it is working with you all and what dedicated individuals you are to have sought this plan to fruition and now to be making sure that it's implemented correctly. I really applaud your efforts to do that, and I'm really happy to be a part of that. I realize that this is my 10th year working on the Habitat Plan. This is our 1-year anniversary of the Implementation Board meeting. It was on April 26th. It was the 1-year anniversary of the agency. So we have cake to celebrate the first birthday, anniversary, whatever it is. And if you squint real hard, it looks like bay checker spot butterflies so on the cake. So anyway, please enjoy after the meeting. But I wanted to thank you all very, very much for giving me the opportunity to serve the agency.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
as someone who has served in 2 capacities with the Habitat Conservation Agency for many years, I was on the legal team as a representing the city of Gilroy. The law firm I worked for represented the city of Gilroy, and I was assigned to the legal team that worked on the ACP, and Vera was on that. And I just wanted to thank you for all of the help you gave all of us on that committee. Some of us were new to it. I certainly was from that standpoint. So I just want to thank you for your service, for everything you've done to see this through to fruition. 10 years is a long time to stay even interested, let alone engaged. So I just wanted to say thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll look forward to the cake afterwards. Thank you for doing that. Okay, item number 1, we have your recusal, which is fine. Motion to approve, discuss.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously, with the exception of Member Fitzmore, who recused himself. Thank you. Item number 2, review, and I'll bet that word's recommend, the governing board adoption of the fiscal year 2014-15 Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan. Let me switch over to number 2. We'll do that. Ken?
Thank you. Active places, there are some one-sided sheets that will end up probably going on the screen behind me, but since I can't read
Well, that reminds me, we're
behind
going to have a tour of the new chambers
Ah.
after this, which is where our next meeting will be. Thank you.
Very good. So there are a few things that in front of you in terms of the budget. Just a couple of overall observations. You had a budget workshop in March. You actually provided some direction at your January meeting on various items in the budget. You had a budget workshop in March. The Public Advisory Committee reviewed the budget on May the 1st and recommended that the budget be approved. Your role today is to review and make a recommendation to the governing board. The objectives of the budget difference between what you saw in March and now are very minor in terms of total dollars and just a few shifts around. I'll identify the major one of those. But we've identified and we continue to identify 8 important objectives, starting out with efficient and effective permitting of public and private sector projects. I have to again thank the local permittee staff, led by Rob Eastwood and county planning and involving just about everybody from various staff people, for continuing to work on getting an application process that is smooth and efficient, and that is no easy task, as we have found. It is a major challenge. Obtaining the Corps of Engineers permit is another high priority, and I'll talk about that under item 13. We want to construct at least one wetland restoration project in the 14-15 year. We want to start the process of enrolling land from Santa Clara County Parks and Open Space Authority. There's commitments for land, and we want to start that process of getting land into the reserve system. I think there is a very, very good opportunity to acquire in fee title or conservation easement a new site for the reserve system in this coming year. We have identified 9 focus areas for conservation planning, and the idea is to get ahead of the curve to the extent that we are moving into these areas with some forethought. Some of this work is already underway. We're focusing considerable attention on burrowing owl issues right now, and others are coming along in very quick order. And we get into continued machinations in terms of collecting data and the complexity of that and doing that efficiently. And then also we'll be doing much more work on grant investigation and grant application, grant identification. On revenues, the numbers are essentially as you saw them in March. There's an assumption of a $2 million grant, most likely federal Section 6 land acquisition grant. That's not a sure thing, but I think there's a good possibility of getting that type of a grant. And the fees are identified by the various fee categories. On the expenses, the one major change from what you saw in November is that March had a cost center called unappropriated reserves, and that has been moved up into capital reserves. And so now the capital reserve, or capital expense account, is projected at over $11 million. And any expenditures under capital expenses would be authorized by the board. So there's no authorization to spend any of that. We can see that as money available for land acquisition, for wetland restoration and creation, as the work comes along on those areas. And it will be very good to, I think, have that as fees start coming in to the agency, to have this growing source of funding that we can draw on when projects come forward, when opportunities come forward. So that is a very, very brief overview. And again, the recommendation is for the board to review the budget and make a recommendation to the governing board.
Thank you, Ken. It's item number 2. Anyone wishing to public? Seeing none. Board members, discussion, motion? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. So the capital expenditures, if we don't get enough we don't achieve the revenues we wanted for that year, then we just reduce our capital expenditures? Is that where you adjust?
Correct. I mean, as revenue will come in over the year, and as revenue comes in and it's unexpended, it'll fill either that account versus the other items, which are more precisely, the expenditures are much more precisely defined.
Okay. And my second question is, I know we have talked about reimbursing the local partners for their initial investment. Is there an item in this budget?
Yes, that is part of the budget, and that reimbursement, the first one of those would essentially occur at the end of the 2014-15 year. We need to get revenues in first, and right now we are working with each of the local agencies in terms of the process of transferring the money and tracking the money. And we need to have a very, very good record, both for auditing purposes, but also for compliance with AB 1600 state regulations, Fish and Wildlife Service reporting, etc. So we're setting up a very detailed process where the money will come to the county, which is the county's banker, and then go into the Habitat account, but there will be a clear record of each deposit and what it consists of and what parts of the fee structure it comes from. And that process is being refined right now and should be in place within the next week or so.
Okay.
Yes, I think paying ourselves back, as you said, should be towards
Yes,
the
and the idea would be that that a year from after you have a year's of revenue, then you can calculate the plan preparation fee return to the jurisdictions, and you can take an action, I would think, in next year's, in the 2015-16 budget, or at the end of the budget year, to authorize those transfer of funds back to the.
But probably thank you cards won't do it, is what you're saying. No? I'm just thinking.
I think people look forward to a check.
There you go. Yes.
So, I understand that we had talked potentially about having a development fees adjustment discussion, but we understand now that that sort of was done in advance, so we're...
Right, I've included that later on under item 13. The fee ordinance is an automatic adjustment. So the adjustment will occur June the 1st. And that's the ordinance that the agency adopted last year when the development fee schedule was adopted. It is you have already adopted that, so it's done. It's a finished action. It is just being implemented.
So if I have a question or concern about that, should I wait until item 13?
It's on item 13 right now.
Good.
Thank you, Andrew. And Rose, welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. Any other questions or motion, Brian?
I had a
Member
couple
Schmidt.
questions. Sure. So we had two pots of money, as I recall, coming into this. One was some money from the water district,
Yes.
and the other is there were some private projects where they had some type of in lieu fees.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that is that part of that? These revenues?
No,
Those-
no, those are the two. Those would be the FY13 and FY14. And I try to keep using 2012, 13, and 13, 14 because I'm finding different agencies apply different definitions to the term FY.
Okay.
So those revenues were part of this year, and actually all in this year. They weren't part of last. I don't think anything came in before the end of June 2013. That's the money we're living on right now.
Yeah, okay, all right. So I was trying to understand if this is included one-time monies that are not going to be around in subsequent years. It sounds like it isn't, because that money...
Right, these are primarily fees.
Okay.
And the good news, and I think at Contra Costa County, they adopted their plan on January 2000, or went into effect on 2007, January, and they are right now processing the first private development with fees. And that did, from an economic standpoint. We have hit the curve in a better place than my friends in East Contra Costa.
7 years. Absolutely.
And then we have that stay-ahead provision. So we have impacts there for fees, and we have a stay-ahead provision. And we're going to not necessarily do anything with a significant amount of this money. We're still okay on the stay-ahead?
Well, the transfer of lands from county parks and from the Open Space Authority doesn't have a dollar with it. So that's not going to draw down your dollars. There are financial obligations for management and maintenance of land, but not acquisition costs. So the impact of those transfers will be quite small, relatively speaking, on the budget. The capital expense amount is for new acquisitions or new wetland restoration projects. And so the stay-ahead provision kicks in really after 2 years.
Okay.
And we assume that, and we will be working with OSA and Parks to move land, to prioritize the transfer of land from the agency, from the Parks and from OSA to the agency, and do that in a way that in part addresses the stay-ahead need. So we come out of this process in a couple of years. I say we, you folks come out of this process in a couple of years with that stay-ahead provision, in place. And I think also, very honestly, if you're making a good faith effort on that, nobody from Fish and Wildlife, state or federal, is going to wrap your ears for that.
Yeah.
They want to see good faith effort moving forward.
Okay. And just to be on my soapbox for a second, I'm just very excited about the wetland acquisition and the possibility of fee title acquisition. I haven't been involved in this as long as Vera. It's been about 9 years for me instead of 10 years. But I remember when I first got started, there was some environmental opposition to this project. They thought could be a blank check for rampant development. And I said, this is going to be the 4th major land conservation funding project in the county, after Mid-Penn, Santa Clara Open Space Authority, and the County Parks Charter. And hopefully, if we carry out what we're doing today, we'll see the very beginning of that. So
Awesome.
I think it's really exciting.
Good deal. All right, no further discussion? Yes,
Couple of questions.
Sure.
Mike?
you bet, Rob.
What's our current fund balance, money in the bank? Do you have a sense?
2 parts of the answer. One is it's something in the $250,000 range. Don't have the exact number in my head. Second is there are various partners accumulating funds right now in this transfer process. As soon as we have a process that the finance departments of the various partners can fully handle, explain, etc., and they don't care what the habitat plan is, they want to know how to move the money. As soon as that's in place, which should be certainly by the end of the month, not before, I expect. Well, one partner told me, I have $500,000 in the bank. When can I send a check? So there will be more money flowing in.
So no concerns about cash flow?
Yeah.
Okay. And the other one was, I remember something, and I may not use the proper term, it was like an operating endowment that we're supposed to contribute towards. Do we need to fund that this year? Or do we
Yes, that is part of the budget. There's the plan preparation fee, and there's also the endowment. And these are, the endowment is a percent of the fees, generally 10.33 or 10.34. And for the sake of it, the 100th% makes the complication more difficult. But some fees are 10.33%, some are 10.34. And that money will be segregated right from the beginning, and segregated in terms of, it's for the endowment. And the agreement with Santa Clara County is they will manage that as an endowment. And those are, to the best as we can, those are essentially lockbox funds. And that's a requirement of the wildlife agencies, because they want to make sure that at the end of this process, there's enough money to manage the land purposes.
So is that reflected as an expense in the budget,
Yes.
or is it?
Yes, because it will be an expense.
Thank you. Rose?
So that's not on this budget, on what we're looking at on the expense side, there's no. Is it
Actually,
on
there
is
is.
that capital, or-
It is it's cost center 4.0, plan preparation
And endowment there.
and
You're right.
endowment. And we want to try to make very clear that there's authorization to make those, that protection of money and the transfer to the local partners for plan preparation.
So we saw some increase, adjustment in March to 12 million from 11 million 750.
And that was refinement of local partner. The guidance that I gave to local partners is please be conservative. These need to be comfortable numbers, not somebody's most optimistic estimate. And as those numbers got refined, some of the conservative numbers moved up a little bit. As more activity came through, more applications, the timing of things moved up.
Do we see that moving up again, or?
It's, within the next year, I'm not sure. If it does, it's great. We certainly will have more money coming in than we need, which is even better.
That's
As far as,
never true, by the way. More money than government needs.
Yeah, that would be.
Not possible.
We're going to need it someday to buy land, Ken. Or to
oh, yes,
manage
no,
land,
understood.
Or to manage
But,
land or
you know,
something.
again, I think of East Contra Costa, trying to figure out to get from year 1 to year 2 to year 2 to 3 to 4. And we don't have that particular cash flow type issue. Yes, we'll need all the funds, absolutely.
So it could go up or might not, but, and then how do we manage the transfer when the local entities have funds to transfer in? How often do they do that, or how does that work?
It
So
will
we make sure
vary.
they are coming.
It will vary. The process we're setting up can be a transfer for individual projects, or it can be batched on a monthly basis. Some partners want to do it on a project-specific basis. Some of the permittees want to do it on a batch basis. And very honestly, as long as the records are good and clean and clear,
We don't care which
we
way
don't,
it goes.
we don't
in.
care.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever works best for the finance, for the particular finance folks.
It needs to be transferred at least quarterly, however
Yeah.
person.
That's what I was wondering, is it, is there a
Yeah,
requirement?
it's a
Yes,
quarter-
it's quarterly.
Minimum quarterly.
Can't
yeah.
they keep it more than a quarter once we get the system set up?
And Ken, what you asked for is our review and to make recommendations will be forwarded to the governing board for implementation, for adoption.
Mhm.
So if there is no further suggestions beyond what we have, what we've said so far, is this enough direction?
I think you
For
should
you to go
have a
forward.
motion. and-
Well, yes, well,
Understood, but beyond that, I think this is,
I'll make a motion to approve the adopted budget.
Okay.
As presented with the recommendations.
Second.
motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Yep. All right, item number 3. Vera, could you make an opening statement, please, on item number 3 for us?
I will. The board can consider item number 3 today, but I am recommending that you, actually advising that you not consider either of the supplemental memos that are attached. Those will be dealt, the issues in those memos will be dealt with by separate memorandum to be distributed to the board in the next few days.
Thank you.
And I'm just advising you not to consider the supplements.
Thank you,
were
Rick.
distributed. Thank you.
Thank you. So the recommended action before us is the approval of the employment agreement of the implementation, if the implementation board desires to hire Edmund Sullivan as the agency's executive officer. That's the item. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none. Board members, discussion or a motion? Member Lazat.
Discussion, item 10.A, vacation. It says he'll have 5 days paid vacation, can accrue 15 days of vacation, which may be carried over to the next calendar year. And then what? It's my thought and recommendation that we either put a cap on it or say you can carry it over to the next year and you got to use it, or you use it or lose it.
Okay. Mr. Tweez, would you please come forward? We've got a question for you. We understand as it's written, her point is well taken. It can accrue over, it says, 15 days vacation, which may be carried over to the next calendar year. So that doesn't say if you can do that again the next year, or is it a one-time, not more than 30 days accruing? What do you understand it to be?
We understand this to be that the unused vacation can accrue, consistent with what we understand is common law, but you might want to check with your counsel on the question of whether vacation is a vested right as distinct from other kinds of leave.
Thank you. Vera?
Vacation, you can place a cap on. Sick leave, no.
Okay.
But you would have to renegotiate this agreement with the applicant.
Well, that's why I'm trying to understand, what's the agreement with the applicant? Is
Yeah,
it
what have
maybe
we
carried
agreed on?
over to the next calendar year is what it says. That to me says he can carry it over once. What's the understanding with the applicant?
I'm sorry, I don't know that.
Yeah. Because I think, for me, that's an issue, to be able to carry it over with that year after year after year after year. For 2 reasons. One, I just disagree with that policy of being able to do that. But secondarily is, I think someone in this position or any position of management needs to take a vacation. And I think if there's the ability that they will lose it, that, that says to the executive director, we expect you to take a vacation, no harm, no foul, just, that's part of.
Take some time off.
What we expect from you, particularly if there's, some suggestion that you will lose it otherwise.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
members, I'd be happy to, if you're willing to put this over, deal with another item and come back, I'd be try to
Yes,
respond
because
to your concerns.
it's our desire to get this voted on and done today and not special meetings or conference, whatever's anymore.
One of the things that you may desire to do, though, is direct Mr. Tweez in terms of what you would be willing to consider, because you can always put a cap on hours, or you can say if you don't use it in 1 year, then you lose it. And often agencies put caps on hours accrued. So sometimes it's like 480 hours. I don't know what your experience is with that, but I would ask that you give him some more direction in terms of what you're desiring to obtain from this language.
And one of the issues, Ms. Wazad, is it is only a one-year agreement, so.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
That's certainly a
that
safeguard.
makes the point.
That's a safeguard.
That's a good.
And that was going to be my suggestion is that the next time we had to negotiate this or renew it or whatever, that be an issue. So if it's 1 year
I
agreement.
think that's certainly an out
that-
for us.
Huh?
I think it's certainly an out for us that 1 year from now we're negotiating again.
Yeah.
And we make a note to do that. Remember Herrera?
Well, I was just going to ask, isn't it a year contract? But it does say in here carried over, so it's sort of implying it's carried over even though we have a contract that we're going to renegotiate, so it's sort of in conflict with it.
Right, there's a conflict there.
There's a conflict between that. But that said, I mean, I guess I'd look to what other, what's kind of the best practice. I certainly don't want sick leave carried over.
No.
This is vacation, so maybe there's a maximum.
Yes.
I just want to point out that
Tucker.
as someone who works in a high-tech company and it's standard in the corporate Silicon Valley world, I may not be standard in public office, but
What-
it is standard to carry over year
Unlimited?
after year after year. Yeah, I have like 6 weeks on the books now, but it's capped at 240 hours where I'm.
Yeah, there's a cap.
Well, that's
So
what
to
the
cap it
suggestion.
would be, but not to just say no after 1 year, because sometimes people want to take a month to go to Europe or something.
Right.
And sometimes people want to go to other countries. There's people from other countries like India that want to save it up.
Well,
so they can spend
let
more
me
time.
ask this then, just by a show of hands. Is there a consensus to have a cap?
Yes.
Yes? That's a yes, yes, show of hands, you listen. Okay, so Ed, what can you do between now and the end of the agenda? Assuming you can reach Mr. Sullivan. Do you need a number from us? Do you want us to say a cap at 2 years? Do you want us to?
Well, I was asked to find out what his intentions were, and I think that's important.
Okay, I think it's also important in that
And I'll ask-
conversation
I'll ask my
that you have
colleague
our intentions as
what her
well.
intention was.
Okay.
If I might
Please.
add, I read this as kind of attempting to say you can carry it over for 1 year only, but not quite saying that. Maybe that's what everybody thinks, and if we can nail that down.
Why don't we just
Probably
interpret it that
yeah.
way? Can we just interpret it that way?
Well, I'm going to caution you that oftentimes these contracts are interpreted in a way most favorable to the party that has the least bargaining power. And so, and if it's ambiguous, it'll be in favor of the ambiguity. And so I think that it really behooves you, if you don't understand this, to make it clear.
Okay,
And
what-
that's why I raised it, because I thought, I read it that way, but I thought,
It is.
if I was on the other side, I'd read it, I can carry it over.
Well,
here.
let's try and make it clear. If 15 days is 1 year, and I seem to be comfortable with the 2 years. I want to say carryovers cannot exceed 30 days.
I think that's really low. I don't know. I don't have a problem with carryover for vacation. I would accept it if the board wants to do a cap, but I just don't have a problem with it. It's sick leave that's the issue with carryover.
And we're covered on sick leave. That's already been agreed upon, as far as not a carryover.
Yeah.
Yes, Rob.
I might suggest 3 years as the max accrual, so 3 years the annual accrual. So in this case, you're right, if it's 40 times
So it'd be
3 is
45 days.
120, that would be 360 hours. And once you hit 360, you couldn't accrue beyond that.
We're saying 45 days then is what you're saying. Okay, yes.
A suggestion is that since this is a one-year agreement, you could approve the agreement and also set a direction for negotiating the next agreement. Since a one-year agreement is going to inherently not include a lot of carryover, but then set your own. I'm not going to say. I almost said policy, and that may be a little strong. But set your direction and document it in the record in terms of where you want to be 9 months from now, or so, when you're starting to talk about, is there a second year? Yes, we want. No, we don't. Whatever.
So the board would approve this contract and let them know that there's a consensus of limiting
Exactly, and that this
vacation
would be
carry forward. It's not yet
an explicit
decided what that amount
negotiation
should be.
issue in the second year, if you ever get to a second year.
Okay. How does that sound? Does that sound reasonable compromise? Am I getting nods of heads? Yes? Yes,
I would
please.
say for item 2A, we will need to adjust the start date from July 7, 2015 to June 30, 2015 to July 7, 2014.
You said 2A?
Oh,
It's a typo.
there's a typo.
Typographical error.
Good catch.
Good catch.
I have one more.
Yep,
Otherwise, he owes us.
that's exactly right. Yes,
I have one more.
Member Sot.
Not to indicate that you may not be the chair for the next 20 years. I think under notices, rather than having your name, it should just say chair.
Good idea. What number is that?
14, notice to the agency, just say chair of the implementation board.
Can I give your home cell
Yes, absolutely.
to agency?
299.
Implementation.
And to that, the address should be address of the agency,
Yeah.
not the business address of the individual chair. So if you could put
Agency
the
address.
Alkire address on there instead.
I do have another point of discussion
Please.
for the board. Looking at 3A, do we feel that 60 days, God forbid anything, that he's less than spectacular in his position, but if he chooses to resign, is 60 days enough? Advance notice, enough time for us to find a suitable replacement, to be able to get on board and to be able to find someone that's going to be able to meet the characteristics and the needs of our
Probably not.
organization?
No, I don't think so.
Probably not. I guess there's also an agreement, though, again, with the employee. Ed, we're back to you on that one. It'd be nice to have 90
My
days.
experience is that 60-day notice is a great deal of notice, given the Constitution. Employees not indentured servant.
And now legally, what can you do? You can't hold them to it.
No,
Right.
Well, the other issue with that too is it's a balancing act because, in practice, if you don't want the person around, you don't want the person around, or if they're already moving on, you really don't want them there. And there are circumstances where, where you really do want to have a cutoff time that is long enough to do what you need to do, but short enough to make sure that things don't happen that you don't want happening. So that's really the practical balancing act. But you're right, under the Constitution, you can't hold people for long periods
But
of
by
time.
contract, they can agree to this notice provision.
Yes.
Thank you. And unless there's a majority here that really find this objectionable, remember, Rogers, the point you brought up is a great one. And no, I don't think it's enough time, but I think the reality is
Right.
that we're not going to hold them longer, and I certainly want to get this contract done today. So that could be another item, if we wish at that time,
Yeah.
to bring up.
Just knowing the length of the recruitment that this position went through and the candidates that were brought forward,
Yep.
factoring all of those thoughts into future discussions.
Won't be enough time,
Hopefully, we don't have to.
but it won't be enough.
We just bring Ken back.
I think you're right. There we go. There we go.
I'm called permanent.
He's
I have a-
moving
Okay, yes. Member Schmidt?
11B, so that's to provide some level of oversight, make sure that ED isn't doing junkets, but I think requiring board approval prior to the travel could be difficult under some contexts.
Oh, because of our meeting schedule.
Right, so I was thinking maybe changing it to the board chair approval. Or maybe at some future point, we could just come up with a not to exceed level. But a simple change would be to change it to board chair approval.
Okay.
If the board agrees.
I
Further
would
discussion?
suggest that is quite positive, since trips to Sacramento are not infrequent, and that's more than 100. Even a trip to Vacaville is more than 100 miles.
There you go.
Can we make that change now?
One of the things that you might suggest in there, though, for board chair approval would be to put a dollar limit on the amount of that authorization or something, that it requires full board if it's, say, over a certain amount of money, like $10,000. If it's less than that, the chair can do that. And I will tell you that we just did put out an RFP for a financial accounting system, and one of the things that we asked in that RFP for the consultant to do was to do financial policies for the agency, which include a travel policy and how and who will approve that, so that we're making sure that money is where it's supposed to be and not misused. And so I would suggest that if you do that, that you put a cap on approval, a dollar cap on approval. If
So
you
subject to chair approval on amounts in excess of, I think we're going to want a number below 10,000, right? A couple thousand, what number?
Except when you're chair, then it should be about 2.
2,000?
When you're chair. But
Couple
other than
thousand?
that, it's...
Anybody else?
You're the county, you know.
I don't know, Ken, what was your trip to Washington? total?
Lazat,
Oh, yeah,
check.
what was his last?
1,700 and some odd.
Yeah.
So, 2,000, 2,500 ought to do it, okay?
What did we just come up with? 2 or 25? What's the proposal?
Let's make it
So if we
25.
wanted to be-
25.
25? Everybody fine? Majority of you fine with that?
Sure.
So the idea then is the board, the chair can approve up to 2,500.
If
Yeah.
it's more, it's the board.
And a bigger trip than that's going to take a meeting
Mhm.
and advance notice. That's certainly not a jaunt, as you said, to Sacramento or somewhere back.
Yeah,
So-
it's bigger than that, you're planning for it for some length of time.
Yep, and you have notice of it and all the rest. Okay, yes,
I have another question about the contract.
Member Court?
Number 4, under severance, my question is, at the end of the contract, does the severance apply should we decide not to renew?
Severance provision, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. The new members, my name is Ed Tweez, I'm with CPS HR, who's involved in recruitment, and my colleague negotiated this
Pam.
agreement. The severance is in the event that the board determines to terminate the agreement. If it terminates of its own weight, as it's run, because of the year, but the severance is not.
He understands that.
He understands that,
Understands that
he's agreed to
when
that.
you're under
Yep.
just a 1-year contract?
Okay,
He is there is a provision here for annual evaluation, and he is hopeful that we'll all be able to continue in your relationship, but that would require an agreement.
but before we give him a raise, let's hire him. Okay, yes, please.
Just back to travel for a second. So Vera, when you're talking about the travel policy, is that going to be for this agency too, or is that what you're talking about? So that would include, I know this is a minor point, but, we've been, San Jose's gone through travel audits, and the media tends to look at where you travel, and if you're using first-class tickets and staying in suites, it comes about. So that would be, obviously, that would be part of travel policy too, so that
Yeah, and I will be
Not
no
that
advice
anybody would
on
do
that,
that, but
obviously, but we did include, how we came up with what we thought that this agency would need was, I actually, I don't know if this went through county finance, but it did go through San Jose Finance and our auditor, and our, excuse me, not our auditor, but our lead accountant. And they were telling me what basic things an agency of this size would need. And so we did list policies like mileage, travel, cash, how you handle cash, how, the accounts are used and that kind of thing. And so we'll see what they come up with for an agency this size. And obviously, you'll be able to comment on that because you would have to adopt those policies. But we wanted them to draft smart policies.
yeah, I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that, we don't get caught in something where somebody did a first-class ticket not knowing we didn't have a policy, and the press gets a hold of it because it doesn't.
Unless they can prove it was cheaper than Coach.
Well, yeah, but I mean.
They'll still run with the
does
story.
happen.
They'll still run with the story.
It does
You're
happen.
right.
Pardon?
I said they'll still run with the story, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
no, absolutely.
Okay,
Conservative.
so we have the changes that have been said, and you picked them up, and we have all that there. We may have to restate them, the 4 or 5 items in a motion here. If there's no further changes to be made, I'll look for a motion. We need to incorporate the changes, and I think we just go down paragraph by paragraph, by number. Does that work for everybody? So before we do that, is there a motion to approve the contract with the changes
So
made?
moved with the changes which will now.
The change which are going to come in just a second.
Which we'll now come and talk about specifically.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion on those? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, if you'll just read back, I guess starting with paragraph 2, where July 7th, 2015 becomes 14.
Okay, all I have is quick notes, but what I have is about the contract for the hours, to make a note for the next contract to cap them.
Okay, and that's vacation hours.
Yes, vacation
Okay.
hours. Let's see.
So capping of vacation hours to be determined.
And
Yeah.
that's section 10A
10A.
of
Why
the
don't,
agreement.
Madam Clerk, why don't I try and give this a
Okay.
go? So 10A was that. Back to paragraph 2 in the second sentence, July 7th, 2015 is changed to 2014.
And that's 2A.
In paragraph 11, probably B, it says the approval subject to chair's approval on amounts in excess of $2,500. In paragraph 14, the notices to the agency will go to
And
whomever.
subject to travel policy that's going to be implemented.
Yeah.
You're the motion-
They are anyway, in the agreement, they are anyway subject to all policies, but it also needs to say, though, that it requires board chair approval for anything that's up to $2,500 and implementation board approval for anything over $2,500.
That's
That's the way I
that's a
heard
little
it.
different.
Excuse me, I had that
It's a little
backwards.
bit
You're right.
different, yeah.
Chair approval on amounts 0 to 2,500
Right,
and board approval in excess.
correct.
Okay. In item 14 to agency, it'll be sent to whomever the chair is at the time, and the address will be the address of the agency. And members, any other that we agreed upon that were discussed? Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. No further discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. That passes unanimously. That's, I mean, let him eat cake, right?
Oh, now he's happy.
Right,
Look at
Vera?
him. He's got a big grin.
Free at last. He's there.
See the smile.
Oh, let me tell you, I'm sure my wife is feeling the vibes.
She just felt it. She just felt it. We are going on vacation. I can just see it. All right. Item number 4, without board approval, that's right.
Yeah, right.
All right. Item number 4 is the
Item number
approval of the
4 is
agreement.
the appointment of Habitat Agency's General Counsel, very briefly.
Okay.
You authorized back in January going out with an RFP for legal services. City of San Jose indicated they would not want to continue their agreement beyond June 30th of this year. We had 14 responses to an RFP. I want to extend a great deal of thanks to Debbie Cobble and Andy Faber and Mayor Steve Tate, who assisted me in reviewing the 14, getting it down to 4, which was not necessarily easy, and then interviewing 4, and that got it down to 3, and we had a great riches. We had 3 applications. I think the group felt any one of whom could well have done the job. If they were the only one of that, they would have been easy. But we ended up with 3 that had to be narrowed down further, and that task was tossed to me. My recommendation is a contract for the services of Valerie Armento, and that's through the firm she's associated with in Mountain View. Very briefly, the deciding factors in this process, I think, are a combination of great depth and breadth of experience. 25 years in the public sector. She was Sunnyvale City Attorney for 12 years. Actually, 14 years. But a great deal of experience in public sector employment, and then in the last 9.5 years, she's been in private practice providing services to public agencies. So she has seen just about everything, I think. And the second factor is time and physical availability. It's an office in Mountain View. Her schedule is such that we can get clear, good attention, and we're not going to become the tack-on assignment to an already overloaded person. So time and physical availability experience, I think, very positive. It's a 2-year agreement. Compensation is a monthly retainer of $10,000. As Debbie, Andy, Steve, and myself went through the proposals, we really concluded that we had retainer proposals, we had per hour proposals, and we had some that mixed and matches, part retainer, part per hour, and they all pretty much came out the same when you tried to get to it. So this is consistent with almost all of the other proposals. There was one sort of highball one. And then there's a part of that's $10,000 per month. There's a $10,000 per year for legal expenses outside of those covered by the retainer, and that would be subject to actual approval by the executive officer, and then a miscellaneous $1,000 a year for reimbursement costs. So I'm very pleased with this, with the way the process went, and recommend approval of the agreement.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for that. Thank you for the work, Debbie. Thank you for everyone that was involved. Please thank Mayor Tate as well. More you know. Any motion, any discussion? Member Lazat?
Is the retainer hours billed against that, or is it a flat 10,000 a month?
It would be a flat $10,000 a month.
And I move to approve the 2-year agreement with Atkinson Ferguson in the person of Valerie Armenentu as the Habitat Agency's General Counsel.
Thank you. Members,
$266,000.
Member Siebert, do you want to second that and then make a comment, or do you want to make a
I'm
comment?
happy to second that, but
Or discussion?
I'm sorry.
I have a couple questions. No, I don't think they're.
Okay. Second.
I don't know that they'll be substantial, but we'll find out. First question, I guess, is for agency counsel. I'm a little bit concerned, and I'm probably concerned without needing to be concerned about a conflict of interest, but because I know it's very common with legal services to have a retainer and then other services. But that means if our counsel says, this is beyond what I can handle, we then hire somebody from that firm. Is that a problem with Government Code Section 1090?
If you're talking about, well, I'm not exactly sure about the last part of that question, Mr. Siebert, but with conflict of interest, if she's conflicted out, then they are going to have to recommend or go through a process where someone here is going to have to select other counsel, or what they can do within their own firm is set up an ethical wall in order to have, which is actually what we've done in my office, for example. We have an ethical wall. Since I have been serving the agency, have not dealt with habitat plan issues with our planning department, even though I represent them in other matters. And so we have carved that out, but we have an ethical wall. I also, by the way, represent, for example, a civil service commission, which deals with employment matters in San Jose. I cannot speak to other attorneys in our office who prosecute cases in front of that commission. I represent the board. And so we have an ethical wall, and I have to remind people of that, but I'm very cognizant of it. So her firm will have something similar as well if they need to set that up. I don't know that we expect that would happen, but but it may, in which case they need to deal with it. And as lawyers, we have rules of conduct that we have to follow that deal with that are as strict, if not stricter.
Maybe I was probably not very clear in the question then, because that wasn't the issue.
I'm sorry.
The issue is someone works with a firm, I presume a partner in a firm, then recommending that someone else in the firm get more work. That seems to be a conflict of interest. I mean, I'd be very comfortable with if we could eliminate the litigation and other hourly services in favor of having our agency counsel recommend some other firm to be used. But otherwise, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not a conflict of interest.
Well, if you need someone to do litigation, you need someone to do litigation. And if their firm has the capacity and the knowledge to handle this, it's not necessarily a conflict. You have this already in an agreement where you've agreed for those services. They're not necessarily suggesting it. Litigation happens. Someone has to answer a complaint within 30 days. You often, if you are in-house counsel, need to do something before you can actually hire outside counsel to handle litigation, because you need to be able to work nimbly. And so I don't believe that there is a conflict here. We're basically saying we'll pay you this much hourly if litigation occurs, and then we can decide if we want to continue with that or not, if there's some expertise outside that we need.
And Vera, if I may, Member Siebert, I think what's being brought up, and I certainly understand the point that you're making, is that if you hire someone on retainer, and this is all about ethical behavior. I'm not saying anything unethical about any person I don't even know, an industry, a trade, or anything, but I think what's being asked is the person that we hire on retainer could say, this is outside my area of expertise, but there's a person in my firm that can handle it. And even though there's an ethical wall there and all the rest, we're the one paying the retainer and then the additional hours. And so I think you were asking about, should we simply say, if outside counsel is needed, that referral is outside the firm?
Correct.
Is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
And at a certain point, there's a lot of trust you have to trust your attorney. You have to trust your attorney that
And
they
you
can't
also
handle
have
it, and with the referral.
You also have to trust your executive officer to look at bills and to be really jealously guarding agency assets, to make certain that those bills make sense and that they're not being overbilled and that they truly are doing that work. So it requires a review of billing as well, which, you know, anybody will tell you you absolutely need to do. I was looking for the portion of this work. You have a basic scope of work that is pretty broad, and that's what's covered by the retainer. The other services litigation is detailed work on elections, referendum, and initiative process. I don't know where that would ever come in place here, but you know, but we just left that in the agreement. It was there. Protracted negotiations with respect to agency contracts, joint powers agreements, real estate transactions, and permits. That's a little bit shakier. I mean, obviously a little bit more because you are going to be acquiring property. You are going to have protracted negotiations over real estate deals, and when does it cross that line?
And I'm glad you brought that up because that was exactly my next point.
So,
Go ahead,
yeah.
Gordon.
Well,
Member
I think-
Siebert,
I
why don't
think
you ask
if
a
we-
question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think perhaps we need to define protracted because I would hope, and you know, with a very impressive resume, and I'm happy to second the recommendation from Member Lazat, but I'm somewhat concerned that we would add number 20 as an item that hopefully would be covered within the retainer, and maybe even 21. But I just want to raise those. I don't have. It's not a trench I want to die in, but I thought it's something that we, as an implementation board, ought to at least discuss.
Debbie, please come forward. Ms. Cobble.
Thank you for indulging me. I just want to share as a member of the committee that reviewed the resumes. I think this is a really good question for the board to talk about. As Ken mentioned, we had a variety of proposals. Some were straight hourly, some were a combination of hourly and retainer. I will say that the contract that we ended up with, which doesn't mean you have to stop with it, but of all the proposals we got, is probably the most favorable to the agency in that it covers more in the retainer umbrella than in the hourly rate. My sense from having managed outside counsel in the past is that you're at more risk when everything's hourly, because before the executive director even has a chance, if they want to go beyond the retainer, they're going to have to get approval. They can't just start billing hours. Whereas if you have a straight hourly contract, you can be off to the races if you don't manage it real carefully. So again, it doesn't mean that this isn't a really valid point to raise, and I think, as Ms. Clara said, because this is like any of the contracts for the agency, including ICF and others that we pay a lot to, the executive director needs to manage those contracts very carefully, and the ethical obligations of the attorney are some control, but you still have to watch it. So I think it's, for what is out there and what people are proposing, which all of them are doing these proposals, I think we got the best balance, a limitation on the kinds of things that would go out. And I think in terms of the protracted, the cost of this contract assumes a basic certain level of effort from month to month. And I can envision if we had a real estate transaction with a party that has staffed with 4 different law firms, just to name one that we've all dealt with, you could find yourself going for months and months and months and months and months using up, and that's not, we'll end up, anyway.
Using up the hourly is what your
I
point
wanted
was.
to point you
Thank
to
you for that
section-
expertise, Debbie.
I wanted to
Appreciate
point
that.
you to section
Vera.
3A, and it would be the second full paragraph of 3A, where it talks about the prior approval of the executive officer for litigation and other hourly services. So there does need to be authorization there. So you have one checkpoint there, as well as the billing. And this is also, by the way, other than the fact that this is a retainer arrangement, the arrangement with San Jose was an hourly, but this is essentially the same agreement that you had with San Jose for my services, with the exception of one tweak to billing that Ken had asked me to do, and I wanted to include it in here, which is that you will also separately
itemize those items that are reimbursable to the agency, meaning that if they can be reimbursed by an applicant because you're providing services on an application, then we need to itemize that. That's in here. And the second item is we, in our previous agreement, had an indemnity provision that was between public agencies because we're public agencies. This doesn't have that. It's a private contractor indemnity arrangement. So those are the two essential differences in this contract.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Mr. Courtney.
My thought is that under Exhibit A, for the scope of work on number 3, the last sentence says drafting of transactional real estate documents would be considered other services. And above it, it talks about review. So my interpretation of that is that included in the retainer is a review of real estate documents someone else might give us to consider, but if we want to draft our own, then we'd be paying for it. And I think that is kind of the dividing line.
For that issue, I think certainly see
Correct.
that being the case.
And the additional, beyond the retainer, the amount is $10,000, and if it's all but at a partner level of $250 an hour, that's 40 hours. So that's, if you get into a complicated real estate transaction, you can chew that up very, very quickly, but as Vera indicated, that can only be spent with the prior authorization of the executive officer.
All right, any other comments? We have a motion, we have a second, we're in the discussion period. Seeing none, I'll call for the question. Let me just get this right. All in favor of approval of this agreement for our attorney for the HCA, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Ken, item number 5, which is the first amendment to the agreement with the county for services as the Habitat Controller Treasurer.
Excuse me. Item 5 is the continuation, the extension, 2-year extension for the contract with Santa Clara County for Controller Treasurer Services. This is part of your Joint Powers Authority, which designates the county, unless you want to go some other direction, to provide these services under contract. So the recommendation, the dollar amount is lower. There's money left over from the current contract, 1-year contract, and that'll be carried forward into the next 2 years.
Thank you. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on item 5? Seeing none, I'll look to a motion.
Motion to approve this?
Thank you. You were second, Member Lazat. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. So nice not to take roll. All right.
Item 6 is authorization to the executive officer to execute amendment number 1 to the agreement with Santa Clara County regarding provision of geographic information services. This again would be a 2-year agreement. It needs to go to the county board, and I think it's scheduled for sometime in June perhaps. But after the county board takes action, then the executive officer would have the authority to sign the agreement.
And this is for the GIS.
And it's GIS, and again, it's a 2 years. One of the objectives is to try to get out of the annual cycle.
Very important technology in our business here. Invaluable for sure.
Beyond essential.
All right, anyone for number 6 in the audience? Nope. Any motion here for item number 6? Motion to approve. Thank you. And a second. Thank you, Member Rogers. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. That passes. Nays? None. Passes unanimously. Item number 7, short-term interim executive director Ken.
We have 3 agreements with the City of Morgan Hill for various services, staffing, support services, space, etc. One of those agreements involves the key part of it is the payment of half of an administrative assistant. This is Jill Moross. And the recommendation that I made back in March at the workshop is that we take Jill's position, the administrative assistant position, and move it up from half to 3/4 time. And that necessitates an amendment for the contract. The contract itself goes through September of 2018. So it's not adjusting the term, it's just adjusting the dollar amount in the contract. There's also a minor adjustment of calculations which actually benefits the Habitat Agency. So the net on all of this is a increase in the contract of,
Sorry.
trying to raise, $108,000.
Yep. All right, anyone from the public? Seeing none, look for a motion for item number 7.
So moved.
Thank you very much. Need a second? Thank you very much. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Chairman Wilson?
Yes, please.
Excuse
Vera.
me. I've been informed that there's a desire to take up item number 3 again, so if we could have a motion to reopen that item, to reconsider that item. We have some new information, apparently.
New information on item number
Item 3.
3. We
Make a
will,
motion for reconsideration.
Second.
Item number 3.
motion and second. Any
Second.
further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. 3 is reopened.
Mr. Tweez needs to...
Yes, Mr. Tweez?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Mr. Courtney especially, I want to apologize for making a mistake in responding to your question about Mr. Sullivan's understanding with respect to the severance agreement. We've already talked about the vacation accrual, we've talked about severance, the performance evaluation section, all contemplate an ongoing relationship. But the contract is for 1 year only. So your questions about interpretation are appropriate given that it's a 1-year fixed term, but there's this other language that assumes there's an ongoing relationship. For example, in performance evaluation, it suggests that you'll be evaluated annually and that at each year thereafter you'll set goals and objectives. Well, there isn't a year thereafter if the agreement is only for 1 year. My understanding from Mr. Sullivan and Ms. Derby, who negotiated the contract, is that it is Mr. Sullivan's expectation that within the first year you will evaluate his performance and determine for him whether or not his contract is to be extended. If you determine not to extend that contract, he views that as a trigger for the severance payment.
Which is what you were thinking.
So that was exactly the opposite of what I told you. I don't know whether that gives cause for you to reconsider your earlier motion, but I wanted to correct the record.
And for a person like me that's not familiar with what's the norm in instances like that, what's the norm in the industry or the standard? Rob, you're obviously familiar with something.
Not every executive has a fixed term agreement. Some of them are so-called rolling agreements that require each party to give notice of whether or not they intend to extend the agreement. This is a fixed term contract. It's more typical for school superintendents than it is for the positions with which I'm familiar, so I really don't have experience.
I don't understand, so maybe the heat's getting to me or the cold or something. So you have a 1-year contract. However, if you choose not to extend the contract, will you owe him severance pay? Is that what you're telling me?
That's his expectation because of his expectation that during the first year he will receive a performance evaluation and he will learn whether or not you evaluate his performance as sufficient to warrant the extension of the contract. And if it isn't, then you will have told him that in the performance evaluation.
And then the severance pay would be for the following year, for a year's worth of severance pay? Or
No, it's
3 months.
3 months of
3 months,
severance.
is that whatever the language is?
And is that 3 months then fixed year after year? It doesn't go like you've been there 5 years and now you get 4 months? You've been there?
It is currently fixed in section 4 as I read it.
Okay.
I think there's a concern here with having to terminate someone for cause when you have a natural termination of an agreement after 1 year. You can choose to give reasons or you can choose not to give reasons, and he may be entitled to an evaluation or whatever, but there is a difference in getting rid of someone for cause versus letting an agreement terminate. And that means that when it's for cause, you have to give your reasons. If you read this section on severance pay, he then has to, in order to get the severance pay, waive all these things about being able to sue the agency and whatever, and do all of that, which you may want or you may not want, but you're not there yet, and hopefully you won't get there.
Yeah, the severance is a bargain for. He's basically saying up front, if you decide to not continue my employment, I agree not to sue, to bring any other things, and that's the consideration for a severance. So there's a bargain and there's consideration. And
Member Rogers.
my question again goes back to what Mr. Reed was talking about, his interpretation of his contract. Is it reasonable, or can be assumed logically that he's taking the resignation and termination section and rolling it over into his severance and pay, saying that upon reading 3E, if the employee chooses to terminate based on his performance, then I should be given severance at that time. So should we be clarifying or providing clarifying language under 3E to be able to talk about the bargaining and negotiation of being able to separate on cause or for cause?
Ed?
Well, first of all, the employee is an at-will employee, and it's not necessary to demonstrate a cause. Legal action may arise if, notwithstanding it is an at-will employee, you decide to terminate the agreement for some unlawful reason. But other than that, it is not necessary for the board to state a cause. And in exchange, Mr. Sullivan and executives in similar positions request a severance to recognize that they have made a commitment to you for this year, have moved this family, and that provides some protection to them. It's limited in this case to the 3 months.
Because we might not extend the contract, may not have cause, may not disclose cause, but that severance then buys his confidentiality? Is that part of the deal?
Yeah, in section 4 it appears to be, but no matter what happens, I think this language needs to be clarified because it begins, if employee is terminated by the implementation board. Termination of an agreement is different than termination by the implementation board. It means that you are acting to terminate the employment. But termination of agreement means it expires.
Okay. Also, he could give, let's see, I guess he's got 60-day notice. We'd be giving 90 days severance. I guess that's mixing up two. That's hard to get grasp around. Yes, Mr. Courtney, who started all
just
this.
Just a thought. So, you know, from my perspective, coming for a one-year term, I would want, right, just speaking as an individual, I would want some sort of guarantee that, right, if I generally do what I think I can do, and, you know, that I wouldn't want to just, I wouldn't sign on for just a one-year term without some advance notice, right? At a minimum, I would say, you know, okay, if you don't like me, you need to tell me 6 months, 3 months, some advance notice if you're not going to extend my contract. Absent that, I would probably want the severance to apply, right? So if it just got to the end of the year and we said, no, we're not going to continue your services, you know, thanks, you can pack your bags next week. I would probably want that to be interpreted as termination and to activate severance agreement. But perhaps if we provided some advance notice, we wouldn't be subject to that. So that's my suggestion, I guess, to the rest of the board to consider.
Member Herrera.
I think the 90-day severance is a good bargain, and I agree with what Vera just said about we need to make that clear. The clarification she suggested, I think we should do that. But I think we should stay away from trying to, you know, do for cause and all that. If we decide it doesn't work, we terminate the contract, he gets the 90-day severance.
I understand it's reasonable because he's
Yeah,
picked up and moved his family.
I mean, that's
and
kind of
moved here.
like standard, and then we don't have to get into
And he's at will, and we can let him
fighting
go
him.
for
Because
no
if we
reason.
don't, I think he'll try to get it anyway, and I think we'll be in a different, you know, we don't need to be in that adversarial situation. Hopefully it never happens, but I think that's reasonable.
And so if you desire to do that, what I would do in section 4 at the beginning is state some language similar to if employee is terminated by the implementation board or this agreement terminates for any other reason other than the employee leaving of his own volition.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you move through the severance package the way that it is here.
I agree.
You know,
If somebody wants
but
to get up and
It needs
go.
to be something
yeah.
other than the employee's own volition. Right.
Okay, so since we've unless there's any further comment?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Siebert.
I'm not sure, but that might conflict with section 3E.
Let me see here.
I mean, I agree with Member Herrera. It's not
Okay, so-
uncommon, and I think it's reasonable, but, you know, if you go ahead and terminate for cause, or the employer chooses to resign under 3E, then we're relieved of that obligation.
Yeah, well, actually, under 3E, it's going to be negotiated how you want to terminate that employee. If the employee's going to choose to resign, you're probably going to be negotiating what the terms are. And so it could be, you could accept from severance pay 3E unless it's, we can come up with some language to accept a voluntary resignation or a resignation under 3E.
All right, Vera,
If that's what you're intending.
given what we passed before, given that that was reopened, given that we're looking at proposed changes in 3E in the beginning of 4, which, Ed, I think it just clarifies.
It's actually just 4 that we're doing. Yeah.
I don't think, Ed, that'll be anything that's objectionable to Mr. Sullivan. I think we're just clarifying. That's what I'm hoping, anyway. What motion do we actually need at this point? Do we have to rehash what we voted on before?
You would
just
make a
do this?
motion, but what I would suggest, because I think that maybe you would want to circle around with the candidate again over this language, and perhaps you want to continue the item to later on the agenda.
Today's agenda.
Today's agenda.
We're going to be done in 15 minutes.
Yeah, well,
I realize that.
Committee members, if you're okay with that, I want to just get to this today.
He came back pretty quickly, is why I'm
Yeah.
making those suggestions.
Yeah, I think he was talking with Pam, though, not with Ed.
It'd be most helpful if you could write out the exact amendment.
And can I,
Okay.
are there any
Yes.
other conflicts? I'm a little bit concerned, there's a few things in this contract that sort of are ambiguous. Was there any other thing that conflicts with?
Besides the 4 that
Trying
we
to
did.
do-
in
Yeah,
the-
because people brought up a few things, I just want to make sure we're not, don't have anything else that conflicts with.
Okay, we are going to, at this point, we're going to hold this item. I don't know if it'll be a supplemental motion or what. I'll wait to hear on that. Vera's, yep, and Vera's writing up.
There's cake back there if you want to recess.
Please do that, and right through the chair, you get to cut it, okay? Like I said, squint really hard and it'll look like
We could put
Baychecker's
a motion
lot.
on the floor and then if we had to.
We know why you're the vice chair.
Exactly. Okay.
I have a question as a member
Yes.
of the public. I just want to make sure I understood what the change is.
Yep, it's chocolate cake instead of vanilla.
I mean, I'm also concerned about
Okay.
that. So is that the severance doesn't apply if the employee leaves on his own? It's already in the agreement. So that doesn't change. So it's, what changes
Yeah.
is if he's terminated, whether it's by not renewing the agreement or any other way, then the severance applies.
I'm actually trying to read my language, I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to work 3E in here. Let's see if this works for you. The first sentence of 4A would be changed, and I'll tell you where I'm adding the language. If employee is terminated by the implementation board, or this agreement terminates, it says with the exception of the resignation of the employee. Hang on, that's sloppy. If the employee is terminated by the implementation board or this agreement terminates while employee is still willing and able to perform the duties of executive officer, agency agrees to pay employee a cash payment equivalent to 3 months' salary. This provision shall not apply if the employee resigns the employment.
Yeah, I think that's important for the public and everything else. If a person quits, they don't get severance.
Right.
Would it be better to say it is if the agreement is not renewed as opposed to terminates? Because the agreement
We can
by
say
its
that.
terms says it terminates.
Right.
That's more inclusive.
Vera, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I think the language that Ms. Clara just read, it still raises the conflict issue that board member Seabrook raised earlier, which is if you don't change 3E is real clear. Generally, you don't get severance if you resign, but there's the option for the board to negotiate severance. And this is in agreement, so it's not a gift of public funds. It's provided here as an option for the board if the board decides that is in the fiscal interest of the agency, all things considered. So to say in paragraph 4, if you resign, you're never going to get severance is a conflict with 3E.
So I'm actually adding that right now. So hang on. So as we'll say, let me see, if the employee is terminated by the implementation board or the agreement is not renewed by the agency, I should say by the implementation board, while the employee is still willing to perform the duties of the executive officer, agency agrees to pay, and then that sentence remains the same after that. Then we add a new second sentence that says, this section 4 shall not apply if the employee resigns voluntarily resigns the employment, but employee, I'm sorry, I'm saying this while I'm writing it, and agency may agree to severance if employee resigns pursuant to section 3E. And that means that if you could agree to less severance or more, just do what you're going to do under 3E if you want to do want to do a severance.
So then 3E and 4 are then consistent, not conflicting.
Exactly.
And they say what we say.
Yeah.
Can you please read for final board
Absolutely.
approval?
So this will be the first 2 new sentences, and I apologize if I stumble on this. I may have to do it twice or 3 times. If employee is, and this is a new section 4, the first 2 sentences. If employee is terminated by the implementation board, or the agreement with the employee is not renewed by the agency, while the employee is still willing and able to perform the duties of executive officer, agency agrees to pay employee a cash payment equal to 3 months' salary plus accrued but not used vacation. Second sentence, this section 4 shall not apply if the employee voluntarily resigns the employment, but employee and agency may agree to severance if the employee resigns pursuant to section 3E. Period.
That sounds fine.
Ed, do you need time to confer, or we can vote on this now?
I believe that meets Mr. Sullivan's expectations.
I would think
as
so.
I now understand them.
Yeah.
Apologize again for misunderstanding them.
I think at the end of the day, if he's let go, there's severance. If he resigns, there's not.
But if I could quickly check in, and I would suggest maybe you could take a break for cake and we can come back.
You know what? Let's. How about we just? You go handle the phone call. How about we finish the other items on the agenda? You'll come back and we'll do a friendly amendment, perhaps, to what's already been voted on, and not rehash all the rest. So let's go to item 8. Ken, a brief report, please.
Yes, some years ago, as part of the plan preparation process, we contracted with Robert Spencer, Bob Spencer, whose firm is Urban Economics, to provide us a variety of assistance on fees and economic analysis. He proved to be a very, very valuable resource. We have a up to $10,000 agreement under my authority in the current year for things such as the fee adjustment and other types of analysis. And we're finding that as we look ahead that we need some of his additional services in the next year and a half, and that pushes the contract beyond the executive officer's 10,000 authority into something higher, and that is why it is here.
Thank you. Through December of next year is what it is. Anyone wishing to speak in the public? None? Go ahead. Motion approved. And a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Item number 9.
What I would like to do is take actually 9, 10, 11, and 12 in one set of comments, and then I'm going to
Thank you. Is anyone here from the public wish to speak on 9, 10, 11, or 12? What number?
Number 9.
Number 9?
Oh, in fact, all 4 of the special entity.
Okay, why don't you please come forward? Let's just do 3 minutes each and share your thoughts with us.
Real quick, and Walt Kleins, I am chairman of the Citizens Advisory Board, and that we unanimously recommended to the implementation board that all 4 items be approved.
Thank you. Appreciate that and the work that you and your board do. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Matt Freeman with the Open Space Authority. I'm happy to answer any technical questions you may have about the project. We at the Open Space Authority are very excited about them. Coyote Valley in particular is a rare opportunity to provide public access to the heart of Coyote Valley. The project was partially funded by the Jacobs Conservancy and a number of other partners, and so we're all looking forward to your approval of this item. And then I Also wanted to say the Open Space Authority is really excited about working with the agency to acquire new land, enroll it into the reserve system, and then implement some important restoration and habitat enhancement projects.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak about 9, 10, 11, or 12? And Vera, can we take 9, 10, 11, and 12 in one motion?
I think you can.
Okay. Ken, please give your report.
A little bit of brief background. The Habitat Plan has a provision for other governmental entities and regulated utilities that do not get permits directly through the plan to apply for coverage through becoming a participating special entity. Any decision on a PSE agreement has to be made by the implementation board. It's a discretionary decision. And last October 17th, the board adopted a participating special entity policy that had been developed and recommended by staff. There are 6 required findings for approval, which are identified in each of the staff reports. We have made those findings in the staff reports. In sum total, there is not a notable of concern, certainly amount of coverage being requested with these applications. I'll note that the fees and charges in the policy is that the agencies, the PSEs will pay all applicable mitigation fees. They pay $5,000 or 10% of the fees in addition to that, and then there's a reimbursement of actual costs. So we have agreements with 2 agreements with the Open Space Authority, Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve, Sierra Vista Trail and Staging Project, 1 agreement with Gavilan Community College on campus modernization update, and then 1 agreement with the University of California, Berkeley on modifications to their Blue Oak Ranch Reserve way up in Mount Hamilton.
I see nothing with USC, but that's okay.
And these, as sometimes indicated, will be coming back again. We have some phase 1s, we expect phase 2. There are other agencies that are talking to us. So the board over time will continue to see participated special entity agreements always evaluated against the amount of take and does it have any negative impact on the local partners. And in this case, we don't find that. And find really some community benefits, for example, with Gavilan and all of them have, it's really a good use of the plan to provide these benefits.
Thank you for that report and very well written staff reports as well. Members, motion, we're dealing with 9, 10, 11, and 12 together unless anyone wishes to handle any one separately. And I'll look for a motion for all 4.
Motion to approve all 4.
Second. And actually, excuse me, just a point of order, we need to do the CEQA resolutions before we do the approvals of the actual agreements. So you would be taking 9A, 10A, and I got the numbering right here, 9A, 10A, 11A, and 12A first.
Is that your motion? I thought that was your motion.
That's my second.
That was your second. Excellent.
That's the
We're a
A's.
step ahead of you, Vera.
That's the A's.
The A's.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Question, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
For us at the board, for resolutions, we need to do roll call. Is that a requirement?
Particularly in the sequence.
You should.
Even though it's unanimous?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody who's here voted for it? No. Okay, let's do roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Okay. Chair Wasserman,
Yes.
members Tucker,
Yes.
Siebert,
Yes.
Crabtree,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Courtney,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Lazat,
Yes.
Fitzwater.
Yes.
Some laws just need to be changed. Okay, that was for 9, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12A, and now we need the B.
Motion
Now
to
you need
approve
these.
9B, 10B, 11B, 12B.
Second.
Thank you. I'm assuming roll call?
Go for it.
Okay, Madam Clerk? I'm sorry, any discussion? None. Roll call.
Chair Wasserman,
Yes.
members Tucker,
Yes.
Siebert,
Yes.
Crabtree,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Courtney,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Lazat,
Yes.
Fitzwater.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That handles 9, 10, 11, and 12. And that brings us to Ken, your interim report, please, as Executive Director. Then we're going to come back and deal with 3, everybody.
Thank you. Item 13, the Executive Officer's Report, there were 3 items I wanted to call to your attention. One is the Habitat Plan fees, the fee ordinance that you adopted somewhere in the fall, includes an automatic adjustment of fees. The Habitat Plan includes provisions on how those fees are the adjustments are calculated. There are two indices, Housing Price Index, which actually has gone up quite a bit in between 2012 and 13, and Consumer Price Index, which hasn't gone up as much. In the material in the staff report, it identifies how those increases are played out among the various fees. There's 11.53% increase for portions of fees. That's based on the housing index. There's a 2.24% increase on fees, some portions of fees, and that's based on the CPI change. And then I provided a table at your places, and there were copies placed in the back also, which compare the 2013-14 fees with the fees that will go into effect on June 1st of this year. And you can see the changes, which are 10.5% increase for the Zone A, B, C fees, the land cover fees, serpentine, land, and nitrogen. And then the rest of the fees, crowing owl, and the various wetland fees go up by 2.2%. So I wanted to highlight that change. Again, there's no action needed. It is built into the ordinance you adopted a year ago. Any questions on that?
Yes, please.
So I guess my question is one about process first, in that we've sort of adopted this so that it's automatic going forward, and my understanding, I think that at some point there's probably a need to kind of evaluate it further and dive into it. Specifically, I understand that the rationale for using the residential prices, that's what's available from a data standpoint. But as we sort of gain experience with implementation, and we're weighing the need for the mitigation versus the ability, the feasibility of it aspect. We have non-residential projects paying sort of residential costs in a sense that could play through, and just there could be a concern for us that at least in the future, if there's an opportunity to explore, if there's other ways to kind of fine-tune further how we adjust these fees.
Member Crabtree, if I may interrupt for a minute, it was a couple of 3 years ago, Ken, meeting, we said every 3 years we look at the fees, at the system, make sure they're cost recovery, to make sure they're not excessive, we're not somewhere trailing behind.
That is my memory, yes. Certainly with every
5-year
major review, but I think there's another review before that. I believe you're correct, it's after 3 years that there isn't, but there clearly is an intent to not allow the process to just go on and on and on.
Right.
But there would be some real evaluation.
I believe it's in Chapter 9 of the Habitat Plan. I want to say Chapter 9.4.1 or 7 or something like that. I believe it's in the Habitat Plan. It is in the ordinances of all of the agencies that have land use authority. So county and all 3 cities, it's in your ordinance that adopts the plan. It also has a section on mitigation fees. It is also, I believe, in the ordinance that attached to the implementing agreement that we have signed with the wildlife agencies. It has a methodology. And beyond that, AB 1600, Government Code 66,000, requires you to make certain that you're not collecting more than you would reasonably need. And it's not an exact science, but you're doing your best educated guess at that. And so you can't have automatic adjustments that last forever. But this is an item where, particularly in the early years of this agency, we really don't know what those costs are going to be, and they can vary dramatically depending on the property that you're purchasing, for example. What your costs may be. And so we did do an automatic escalator, so you wouldn't have to be looking at this every year or two, but you would take a reasonable look at it at times when you really should.
But to Member Crabtree, to your point though, I believe it's the 3 that we look at it formally, informally, as compared to the 5, which is major like study session group, to look at it and say, are we on track? Because we do not want to be charging the public more than what is appropriate. We do not want to charge more than cost recovery. No government agency does. Nor do we want to be subsidizing on the other end.
Well, and I guess it's just jumping out partly because there's been such a dramatic increase in the last year or two in housing prices in particular, and so I just, for my own education or our group's education, are the lands that we actually intend to acquire zoned as housing lands, or are they
The research that went into the habitat plan on this issue found that this particular index had the closest link to land value changes. There is no index that we're aware of, at least, that tracks land value changes. Certainly no index for Santa Clara County. But this was the one independent, accessible, usable index that was demonstrated to be as closer than anything else to land values. But again, as Chair Wasserman has indicated, the intent is to go back and reevaluate this on a very regular basis.
Member Herrera.
Is there any kind of an appeal process if there was a project that felt that somehow that these fees were extraordinary? Not that that would happen, but is there any process for that?
Actually, there is, I believe, a process, and I wish I had the ordinances with me because when I drafted the ordinances, let me see if it's at the back of the implementing agreement, if you give me a moment here.
Just note that they can do in lieu. If these fees are too much, they can go and get the land themselves.
They can do it. And one of the reasons.
I'm just wondering if there's any.
No, it's a valid question.
Well,
She'll get an answer.
but the other thing that they can also do,
I don't remember having not read every single page.
Ms. Herrera, the thing that is built into this entire concept, though, is that nobody has to pay the fees. They can go and get take coverage on their own. And that's the safety valve here. And so that makes you have to judge, is it worth my time and my money to go and get take coverage from the wildlife agencies, or do I pay the check to the habitat
That's the
agency?
balance. Okay.
That
they have
was
an
sort
option.
of the safety valve that we built into this. And so we're trying to avoid the excessive fee argument by saying, if you want to, of course the fees have to be fair. They absolutely have to pass muster. I'm not saying that they don't. But somebody can always evaluate, do they think that they can go cheaper, faster, another way?
Thank you for reminding me of that.
Yes.
I just wanted to, that's good.
I do have some questions actually related to that, because, take for example, the infill project that's 3 acres of land where there's no species recorded, but they still fall into one of these land cover zones. So they're not really seeking a take permit as an alternative, because they're not actually taking any species. But
Well, actually, they are.
But they're taking habitat, right? Okay, so that's the
Exactly.
presumption.
I guess I may add that in the valley floor, we ended up with some notable areas which are now really outside of the habitat plan, but a property owner can opt into the plan if they find they have a species issue. Because the argument was, we haven't seen any species here for 25 years. We don't think there are species. So, okay. So we took a lot of land out of the habitat plan in the valley floor. Cities of Gilroy and Morgan Hill made a very conscious decision that when land is being developed within the city limits, the habitat plan applies. You don't have the opt-in, you are required in. And that was a decision based, I think, especially on the value of the certainty for property owners in terms of dealing with endangered species issues, and hearing some testimonies for some property owners who encountered it in the midst of designing a project, and now we're losing lots of money real fast. And the local staff felt that the certainty was a very good economic development message, rather than the uncertainty of you may encounter species, and if you do, you will probably have a big problem.
Well, I guess what I'd like to suggest, and open to what others feel about this, but is if, sort of since we're in the early years of this, we're learning a lot as we go through the implementation, if maybe rather than waiting 3 or 5 years, if we could kind of anticipate sometime over the next year digging a little bit more into the fee issue and just making sure we understand that it's working well for the overall goals of the plan.
Okay. Anything else on this side?
I was also going to say
Vera.
that I also believe, thank you, I also believe that there is another provision in the plan, and I'm trying to remember where it is, but there are 2 provisions. There's that one where you don't have to go by the plan if you don't want to, but I believe that there's also a second one that we inserted a few years ago that basically said that you can tell us whether you think it's a taking or not, and of your property or whatever, and that we can evaluate that. But they're rather strict evaluation criteria. you still have to have some use of your property left, obviously. We're not going to say you have to preserve necessarily all of your property or something, but I think that there's and I can tell you about that later if you want me to write you about that, but whether that's there or not, but I recall that there are other provisions like that as well.
Thank you. Ken, what else on your report?
Two other things. One is a progress report on the regional general permit work with the Corps of Engineers. The public notice is out. The 30-day review period started May the 5th. I provided in the staff report the link to the notice. The bottom line is we're making very good progress, continue to make good progress with the Corps on a regional general permit, and I think
Awesome.
The receipt of that by September, around there somewhere, is more and more likely. I will note, though, that in the attachment, the summary of the RGP, that the provision of mitigation of a wetlands restoration conservation project is essential to start using the RGP. And the Corps right now is indicating considerable flexibility in terms of what that means. In other words, if you're maybe construction drawings and a permit application, et cetera, they're going to probably be okay. But that's part of the discussion going on with the Corps. They're not holding to say, you build it first, and then we'll decide.
And for everyone here, what he's saying about the Army Corps of Engineers, all the adjectives and things that he's using are all positive, wonderful, amazing, unprecedented. Just huge advancements. If the Army Corps can become a partner with us, along with Fish and Game and Fish and Wildlife, the projects that, as far as time is money and having all that there, that'll be just that'll be another cake day.
No, that will be very good. And I really have to thank ICF, Jones
We
and
haven't had the
Stokes.
first cake yet.
Army Corps staff is
huge.
over their head in the deep end of the pool
Yep.
with ongoing applications, and ICF and staff are really doing essentially all the work. They're drafting all of the material. I mean, the public notice was drafted by ICF.
Fabulous.
We're doing that to keep them pushing along, and we have a conference call every 2 weeks to keep pushing on them also.
Great.
But again, essentially the consultants are doing a great job. And the last item I want to call to your attention, since you may hear about it, is a City of Morgan Hill item, which will be on a City Council agenda, I think, on May 28th.
And Ken, excuse me 1 minute. Debbie, can you please find Ed? Thank you. He is. Thank you. Go ahead, Ken.
In the late 1990s, City of Morgan Hill entered into an agreement with California Fish and Game for burrowing owl impact mitigation, and it was for the development of the community center and a portion of Butterfield Avenue. That funding is about $170,000, and it's been sitting in the bank or in an escrow account. And California Fish and Wildlife staff have suggested to Morgan Hill that that money be transferred to the Wildlife Agency for work on burrowing owls. Morgan Hill's staff have concurred with that, and so there will be an action coming to Morgan Hill in the next weeks, to transfer the $170,000. I want to note two things. One is it's not in the budget, since we'll see when it comes. And second is, well, I'm conservative.
The check's almost in the mail.
Yeah, the check's almost in the mail, so, you know. And second is, there's a second Morgan Hill burrowing owl issue which relates to litigation. It's a fee that they have. This is totally separate from it. So with Morgan Hill staff, we're trying to keep these potentially complicated issues rather separate, so we don't end up with the overlap and mix-up and confusion. That's my report. And
Thank you very
Keys
much.
has
Your
arrived.
report is duly received, unless any members have any questions further. All right, back to 3. Ed, come on down. It's a go? Okay, then I'm going to suggest, Vera, unless you disagree, that this is a friendly amendment to 3. Motion makers, Rose, was it you?
Yes.
And Kat, you were second?
I think I did.
Madam Clerk, do you recall?
I think I made the motion, you were going to outline the details.
We did outline, and we went through.
We did, I went verbatim, so.
No.
I have
Member Herrera made the motion.
Herrera the motion, and I thought it was Courtney or Siebert that made the second.
Oh,
Rob, do you make sense?
I'm happy to make the second.
Okay, and so friendly amendment is with the changes made by Vera 3 and 4 that have been cleared, if you will. That's all right with you?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And with the new seconder? Rob, you
Yes.
okay with that? Good. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, We don't need a roll call. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. That ends this meeting, and it's a momentous day. We're going to have some cake and also a little tour. Who's giving, are you giving the tour?
I can walk you back.
Are we going to walk through here to see?
Yeah.
Yep, let's tour.
Let's do that and then come back for some cake.
Sign some agreements on the
Yes? Governing board members, there's going to be a governing board meeting next month.
I have Valerie's too. So all I have are the resolutions.
Yeah.